all set? Good evening. My name is Peter Marsh, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Candlelight Vigil for Homeless Animals tonight. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the program that we're going to have and the materials that are available over at the reception table. First of all, everybody, we would like to receive a brochure, which is over at the reception table, that describes the program, but also has information about what each of us can do to end the tragedy of companion animal overpopulation. One of the themes of the evening will be speeches by three people, a legislator and a veterinarian and a shelter operator, from their own perspectives about what can be done. And I think it's important to understand, it's critical to understand that companion animal overpopulation is entirely preventable. The tragedy of overpopulation lies in that it need not happen. If these thousands of animals in New Hampshire each year were killed by a disease for which there was no cure, it would be infinitely sad, but it's tragic in that these animals need not die. But in the tragedy lies an opportunity, and the opportunity is that the medicine, the vaccine for this plague can be provided by each of us, because all that is necessary to end the killing is for enough people to care enough, to do enough to stop the killing. The remedy is caring and commitment, and each one of us has that. And we're going to be discussing tonight the things that each of us can do in our own communities to bring this tragedy to a stop. The second part of our program is going to be a memorial service for the animals that have been killed. And you may be wondering about the chain of collars that has been strung around the perimeter of the plaza. These collars consist of a collar for each animal that has been killed in New Hampshire shelters during the first 7 months of this year, and the first 7 months alone. Each collar represents a description of an individual animal, the date of its death, and in some cases the name of the animal. In some cases, tragically enough, the animals do not even die with the dignity of knowing their own name. A second part of the program will be a reading of individual collars for animals that were killed on one particular day, this past Monday. And shelter workers from shelters across the state will read the names of these animals, and also each collar from this particular day will be available for people to take as a remembrance of the animals that were killed. The chain of collars is a way to try to get to understand that this is not an abstract tragedy, that animals die one by one, and they're killed one at a time. Each animal with its own identity and its own personality and its own history. And it's painful to try to understand this, and it's extremely difficult to comprehend it. But it's important that we try to do that. So before we begin with the speakers tonight, what we'd like to do is to have everyone silently walk around the perimeter of the collars and to look at the names of the animals that are killed and try to imagine what this means. And then as we return, we will begin with the speakers and the rest of the program.
Put on voice activation. You about to start again?
Hi, how you doing? No, wait till people get around. Some people understand.
Well, it'll
getting more people, huh?
It won't move until someone talks.
Good.
But
Sounds
if
great.
you and I say something bad off record, it's going to pick it up.
We'll try not to be vulgar. This is the one right here. It was vulgar.
Looks like you an awful lot, doesn't it?
Yes, isn't it? Don't hold that against me. I'm going to get a pen.
I mean, I know. If it makes a speaker uncomfortable.
No, not
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, pal. Cool. We'd like to get started with the program tonight. Before we do start, I'd like to tell you all that at the end of the reading of the callers in the second part of the program, we will have the actual candlelight vigil itself. And everyone is welcome to get a candle over at the reception table. And be sure the candles have little drip catchers at the bottom. And please be sure to keep the drip catchers on so that they'll catch any wax that might fall from the candle. And we will also have people from the committee working on the vigil who will be going around with lighters to help you light your candle. So before the speakers begin, we'd like to have Beverly Leo, the Executive Director of the Concord SPCA, read a letter from Governor Judd Gregg about the Homeless Animals Vigil. Beverly?
A letter from Governor Gregg. He writes, "Dear friends of animals, as governor of the state of New Hampshire, I commend you for your efforts to call public attention to the problem of homeless cats and dogs. I am sure that your work to increase awareness about this tragedy can convince more pet owners to prevent overpopulation by having their companion animals spayed or neutered. I am pleased to join with Senator Sheila Roberge in wishing you success. Sincerely, Judd Gregg, Governor."
Thank you, Beverly. As I was saying before, the real remedy for overpopulation is simple. It's work and it's commitment. We have a legislator who's going to be speaking to us tonight who has both of those qualities. Before she speaks, I'd just like to tell you a brief story that occurred in the last legislative session when this legislator was sponsoring a bill to establish a low-cost spay-neuter program in the state. She worked to convince her colleagues on the Senate committee that was going to hear the bill to vote for the bill. And a majority of them agreed to vote with it. Unfortunately, at the time of the committee vote on the hearing, some of the legislators did not show up, and it turned out that a majority of the committee voted to kill the bill. And the people that had been working on the legislation were crushed and felt that it was hopeless. But not the legislator who was sponsoring it. She decided to try to convince the full Senate to override the committee's recommendation and to pass the bill. And although those of us that were working with it and the people that were involved in the legislative process thought it was a very unlikely that she would be successful, it's an extremely unusual thing to happen. This senator worked to convince her colleagues in the Senate and gave a passionate speech on the floor of the Senate the day of the vote, and it came to pass. She convinced the majority of the Senate in a very close vote to pass this bill. Unfortunately, we were not able to do our part in the House of Representatives and get it passed last session, but we're working in this session to get that done. It's clear that the companion animals in New Hampshire have no better friend in the Hampshire legislature than Senator Sheila Roberge.
Good evening. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you all for coming. I would like to share some thoughts with you about the role of legislation in ending pet overpopulation. In recent months, I have been disappointed to find that many people have become frustrated or even angry at the political process. Many of those who are the most upset have decided not to participate at all. They tell me they aren't even going to vote, much less participate in the legislative process. I think this is a great mistake. Not participating in the process isn't the solution. It's a big part of the problem. My experience, the quality of the work that we do in the building behind me, is by the people of the state, the citizens of New Hampshire, and legislators alike. It rises or falls with citizen involvement. As more people let their legislators know how they feel about a bill or speak their minds at a legislative hearing, the process works better and better. Legislators not only want to know how people feel, they need to know how people feel so they can better represent them. It is especially easy to participate in the legislative process here in New Hampshire. We are blessed with the purest democracy in any state in the Union. In our House of Representatives, there is a representative for each 2,500 people, far and away the most representative government of any state legislature. And because legislators receive only a token salary, ours is a legislature of citizens, not professional politicians. There have been attempts over the years to reduce the House, to reduce the size of the legislature, and an increase of the salary of the legislators. But these have all been defeated to make the legislative participation a user-friendly process. Therein lies a great opportunity for you. Rest assured that with the legislature that is designed on such a small scale, each person can make a difference. The impact you can have greatly increases if you work together with people of like mind. I am convinced that legislation has a major role to play in pet overpopulation. This isn't an animal problem, it's a people problem. People. People have created it and contribute to it by allowing their pets to reproduce when there are not enough homes for the animals born. In recognizing that pet overpopulation is a people problem, I don't mean to suggest that it is up to one group of people to solve it. On the contrary, people who work in shelters have taken it upon themselves to solve this problem, even though they are not the ones who created it. That is not fair. Pet overpopulation is everybody's problem, and it affects everybody through increased public expenditures and threats to public health. Legislation has an important role to play in ending pet overpopulation. We can all agree that it would be a marvelous achievement to control the growth of the pet population so that the number of pets is brought into balance with the number of available homes. We all agree that the tragic killing of healthy cats and dogs in animal shelters must stop. We should recognize, too, that we must go even further. We must control the pet population so that each cat and dog has a good home, because homeless companion animals lead a miserable existence. Our experience has shown that the spay-neuter programs are the most effective way to control the number of pets in our communities. A major problem is that many people cannot afford to have their animals spayed or neutered. That is why I have sponsored a bill during the last legislation to sponsor a statewide low-cost spay-neuter program. Under this legislation, spay-neuter procedures would be provided to low-income animal owners for only $10. The balance of the cost would come from an increase in the license fees charged to owners of unsterilized dogs. It makes sense that those who contribute to the problem of pet overpopulation should pay for part of the solution. Under this legislation, people who adopt animals from public or private shelters would be able to have their animals spayed or neutered for only $25. I think that it is critical to increase the adoptability of shelter animals if we are to reduce the number who have to be killed. They have had a low-cost spay-neuter program available to shelter adopters in New Jersey for 7 years. During that period, shelter adoptions there have increased by 2/3, while those in the rest of the country, including New Hampshire, have dropped. We must follow in the trail that they have blazed. Establishing a statewide spay-neuter program then is critical. While we were not able to get this legislation passed in the last session, as our first attempt, our colleagues in Connecticut were able to get similar legislation passed, and in New Jersey, the program is thriving. I will continue to work to get pet overpopulation legislation passed in the legislative session that begins this winter. I hope that you will be able to join me in this effort. If you would like to help, please sign the clipboards that are passed around. Working together, we can make New Hampshire a leader in the pet overpopulation control. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Roberge. It's clear that veterinarians have an important role to play in ending pet overpopulation. I'd like to share with you one more brief story about this last legislative session. During the session, it became clear to us that it was important to try to mobilize as many veterinarians as we could to support the statewide low-cost spay-neuter program. But we knew that a number of veterinarians, and some of them are here tonight, were committed, as we were, to ending this tragedy, and we contacted them. And one of the veterinarians we contacted practices in Franklin. I remember we contacted him on a Sunday night. And later that same week, we started receiving letters from veterinarians all across the state saying that they supported the legislation and would help us. And we found out that in the 48 hours after we contacted him, he and his wife sat down and wrote letters to over 100 veterinarians, soliciting their support. And as it turns out, before the session was over, more than 20% of the veterinarians in the entire state had sent his letter back saying that they were going to work with us in ending this process, this tragedy, by getting the bill passed. He practices in Franklin, New Hampshire, and let me introduce Dr. Barry Taylor.
Thank you very much. I've already been introduced. I do practice in Franklin. I am on the board of directors of the New Hampshire Humane Society. I'm active in animal rights issues around the state and nationwide. You may find what I have to say tonight shocking or offensive, and I offer no apologies. I'm here to help save lives, and I'm not here to make any friends. First, the facts. We can't begin to guess how many dogs and cats are starved, drowned, beaten, or otherwise killed due to the overpopulation problem. But we do know that almost 20 million more die in shelters each year. Die. Not put to sleep, put to death. Not euthanized. That means ending a life of suffering or pain for humane reasons. No, these are normal dogs and cats, killed because we can't afford to keep them all, because their lives just don't carry enough value to be saved, because you can get a kitten for free on any street corner, in any town, any time of the year, and you can discard it just as easily. I'd like to relate a personal story. 6 weeks ago, a 10-month-old white female cat was brought into my clinic, barely alive. She had a fractured skull, 4 broken ribs, internal bleeding, and so much sand packed under both of her eyelids that it had worn the cornea, the surface, off of both of her eyes. She was also 4 weeks pregnant. She had wandered up to 2 10 or 11-year-old boys who were digging a hole, and they decided it'd be fun to bury her alive. When she tried to scramble out of the hole, she kicked them and they kicked her and beat her with shovels. The mother of one of the boys only stopped them because a neighbor came over and threatened to call the police. The point of this story is that this is the value of life that society is teaching our children. I know this family. They have pets. Their pets wander around unspayed and unneutered until they get sick or pregnant or just too boring, and then they're discarded and new pets are picked up. This is not an isolated incident. It happens every day, all across the United States. By the way, this particular story has a happy ending. The white cat lives with us now. She's well fed. Thank you. She's well fed and happy. She has 3 little boys who love her to pieces, and somehow she's found it in her heart to love them back. She's recovered physically completely except for one blind eye that she'll carry forever as a reminder of how little value her life had as a stray on the street. So who's responsible? Well, obviously, pet owners, irresponsible pet owners, are to blame for allowing their dogs and cats to breed unchecked. But it goes beyond that. Veterinarians are to blame for not participating in the low-cost spay-neuter programs that do exist in this state, and there are several. These programs exist for people who cannot truly afford the procedure. Veterinarians are to blame for not constantly educating their clients and the public about the benefits of spaying and neutering their pets, benefits to the animal, including increased life expectancy, lowered cancer risk, fewer behavioral problems, benefits to society, including less municipal money spent on animal shelters and animal control, fewer strays causing damage to wildlife and farm animals, fewer bites to humans with the ever-increasing rabies problem. Veterinarians are also to blame for helping and even encouraging people to breed their animals, possibly with the idea that this will increase their own profits. Breeders and pet stores are to blame. There is thank you. There is no breed of dog or cat valuable enough right now to breed on purpose. Every dog or cat bought from a breeder or a pet store means one more animal that will sit at the shelter and never get a home. A surprisingly large number of purebred dogs and cats will also end up in shelters, for many reasons, including the fact that most breeds have their own individual health or personality problems. Large numbers of expensive purebred dogs are turned into shelters or rescue societies every year. The shelter that I'm affiliated with so far this year, approximately 1/3 of the dogs that have been turned in have been recognizable purebreds. 1/3. Anyone who pays a pet store or a breeder for a purebred dog is part of this problem. Shelters have to take a bit of blame too. They're to blame for not constantly barraging us with the cold, hard facts about where the problem lies and what really becomes of many of the animals turned into them. Shelters have a problem, though. They rely on donations from people who don't really want to hear the truth. Breeders' associations, purebred dog owners often soothe their consciences, with large donations to those poor little strays. The shelters need this money to survive. And if shelter workers cried over every death, they would die. These greatest of all animal lovers among us just couldn't survive that way. And I still hear people say, "Oh, I'd never work at a shelter. I love animals too much." And last, state government is to blame for not passing that workable, low-cost spay-neuter program. Right on cue. Okay. What to do? I don't pretend to have all the answers, although I think there are a few suggestions to be found in who's to blame. But since I'm a veterinarian, I can call on veterinarians to support a few changes. And you can all ask your own veterinarian to support these changes or change to a doctor who will pledge to become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. First, I call on veterinarians to speak frankly about spaying and neutering with new pet owners. Make them aware of the health advantages as well as the advantages of population control. Actively, aggressively discourage breeding of any dog or cat for any reason. Let's try to make cats and dogs valuable items again. Second, I call on veterinarians to offer spaying of female dogs and cats at a much younger age than the previously recommended 6 months. Recent studies have indicated that spaying as early as 3 months is as safe or safer than later surgery, results in fewer accidental pregnancies, and much better compliance among new pet owners. And last, while we can't expect veterinarians to work for nothing, after all, this is what we do to feed our families, I do call on them to support making this January a statewide spay-neuter month. During the next few months, I will be making a statewide plea with the backing of the Humane Society for 1 month during which all veterinarians may participate in a voluntary low-fee program with statewide establishment of fixed, lower spay and neuter fees for anyone, regardless of income level. Certain vaccinations may be required at participating clinics, but otherwise, the primary thrust of this program will be to get the maximum number of animals spayed and neutered in a month that is historically one of the slowest for us veterinarians. Lists of participating veterinarians will be printed in local newspapers, and hopefully media attention will be focused on both the problem of pet overpopulation and the generosity of the veterinarians participating in this program. They have to feel like they're getting something out of this. Please ask your veterinarian to participate when he or she is asked to. All right. The question is always going to be raised, why should we care about this problem when there are so many other problems in the world? And there are several good reasons. First, who said we had to solve all the world's problems one at a time? This can be one of our concerns as we continue to address society's other problems. Second, this is a problem whose main solution is primarily a change of attitude rather than a massive expenditure of public funds. And third, I think the kind of change of attitude required, which is a turn toward nonviolence and giving value to all life, would help us in solving a tremendous number of other social troubles. If we learn to show compassion and nonviolence toward other, lesser beings, how can we help but be more concerned with the problems of homelessness and hunger and unemployment and violence among our fellow man? Thank you all for caring enough to be here. Don't let it end here.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. One of the pleasures of my life has been to get to know many of the people that work in New Hampshire animal shelters. And it's occurred to me a number of times that people say that dog owners come to resemble their dogs and vice versa over time. Well, I think that's true about shelter workers and the homeless animals they care for too. They become a lot like the animals in the shelter. Loyal and trusting friends, the best friends that you could ask for. And in many ways too, like the animals they care for, they've been abandoned by the rest of us. Like the shelter animals, people turn their back on shelter workers. Let's face it, they struggle almost single-handedly to try to end this tragedy. People tell them it's their problem, even though they've done nothing to cause it and are the only people that are working to solve it. As monstrously unfair as this is, they don't complain, like the animals they care for, because they feel that if they speak out, that their effectiveness as advocates for homeless animals will be compromised. You know, people say that every living creature has an aura. And people's aura reflects their soul and their state of mind. That people who have an angry aura have a reddish aura, and people that are mean or evil have a dark aura. And that people who are loving and compassionate have a shining aura, like the halos that you see in medieval paintings. Well, to me it's clear that the shelter workers among us tonight have an aura that radiates even before the candles are being lit. All of which brings me to introduce our next speaker. She's the executive director of the Cocheco Valley Humane Society. And she's the president of the New Hampshire Federation of Humane Organizations. And I'm delighted to say is a good friend of mine as well. Barbara Carr.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you from all the shelter workers out there. I'm spilling my Pepsi down. Thank you all for being here tonight. It's really great to see all these faces. Okay, which am I speaking into? All right. Can you hear me now? Okay. We've gathered tonight to honor homeless animals with a candlelight vigil. It seems odd that the word we use is honor when it's so obvious that this is not an expression of human thought used most often when dealing with homeless animals. Homeless animals are considered refuse, litter, dirty, inconvenient, annoying, The problem of not the community, but a problem to be hidden away, not talked about, and when mentioned, deemed tragic. And then we quickly changed the subject. We, the humane societies of this state, are asked to take care of this problem, and we've been doing so, almost silently, for over 100 years now. I am, like you, no longer going to sit silently by while thousands of animals flow into humane societies in New Hampshire, and only the very few find lifetime loving homes. I am no longer willing to be silent while I and dozens of other shelter workers across the state regularly end our day by ending the life of an unloved cat or dog. I am no longer willing to be silent and accept the name of murderer. The plight of homeless animals will remain the same until not only those of us working directly with the problem fight against it. It will take all of us to bring change. As long as any of us accept as love merely feeding animals and providing some shelter, we will continue to see more homeless than can ever find homes. Until all of us understand that you don't simply take a dog home and plug it in, that it needs training and discipline, more will be homeless than will find homes. Until all of us understand that cats are indeed cats, not simply decorations that never scratch furniture, more will be homeless than will find homes. Until all of us understand that these are domesticated animals that need us to survive, that need us to make certain they don't reproduce, that need us to make certain their medical, physical, emotional needs are met, more will be homeless than can find homes. Until all of us refuse to accept free kittens, shop at pet stores, take in strays, all seemingly acts of kindness, animals in shelters will remain homeless. We must empty the shelters before we take animals from other sources. This is how we can truly honor those that are homeless. Our steps to care for animals are directed rightly. The feeding of a stray animal is a kindness, but to leave it at that is not. Our adoption of a homeless creature is a kindness, but to then not neuter that animal is not. Our intentions are admirable, but the time has come to realize that more needs to be done. When homeless animals at shelters cannot be placed, euthanasia seems a kindness, but to leave it at that and not fight back with everything we have in us to end this problem is not a kindness. We do no honor to dogs and cats if we simply note their tragic passing. We must do more. In the pamphlet we've handed out today, 10 simple things are outlined that you can do. We know that the solution to the problem has not changed. It is to educate, to legislate, and to spay and neuter. This has not changed. What has begun to change is our understanding of the complexity of the problem. Educate, legislate, spay and neuter sounds simple. It is not. Over 100 years ago, dogs were often referred to as curs. They had little value to man. In the present time, dogs have come to enjoy some favor in how we as a society treat them. We've enacted laws to protect ourselves from dogs. We license them by law, we vaccinate them by law, we leash them by law, and we collar and tag them by law. These laws were not intended to reduce unwanted births and to elevate the status of dogs, but in large part they are responsible for this happening. Dogs on leashes don't get pregnant. Dogs wearing collars and tags are returned to their owners when they become lost. Dogs with rabies vaccinations don't spread rabies. With dogs not running free in the streets, causing damage, scaring children, harming livestock and wildlife, man is free to develop a new image for the dog. With these annoyances to man removed, he can come to contemplate the value of a dog, and he has. The number of dogs homeless each year in New Hampshire decreases. In the shelter I've worked in since 1986, we've cut in half the number of dogs killed. I don't find this to be much satisfaction as we are still killing dogs. The point I am trying to make is that forces other than the forces of morality are most likely the forces that have slowed the numbers of dogs killed in shelters. In a recent survey in Massachusetts, pet owners were questioned about their opinions on neutering pets. The most astounding thing I saw in the survey was the reason why people don't neuter their cats. The number one reason, it's too expensive. This reason was not given, never uttered, did not exist for the owners of dogs. Does this make any sense? It's less expensive to neuter a cat than a dog. So why is it the number one reason not to neuter a cat, and it doesn't even make the survey for dogs? We as a society have begun to have some honor for dogs, but there is little honor for cats as a whole. Let's look at a few instances that show this all too clearly. This past winter in one of the southern cities in New Hampshire, a parrot and a pet reptile were abandoned in an apartment where their owner moved out. This made front-page headlines, and a massive effort was made to find the cruel owners and bring them to justice. People were outraged that this had happened. Cats, however, are abandoned by their owners every day, and no one takes notice. This past spring, 3 puppies were abandoned in the woods over in our area. Many of the community residents, the animal control officer, and our shelter staff worked on rescuing these puppies that had been abandoned. Again, front-page headlines, and it should be. There are very few people, however, who are not aware of a feral or a homeless cat in their neighborhood, a creature to be pitied, sometimes fed, but then forgotten. We just passed legislation in this state to make it mandatory that cats are vaccinated against rabies. This was not for the protection of the cat, but for the protection of the citizens in the state. There was one individual who gave testimony during the hearings to complain about cats under the new law having to wear collars. It seems he felt it would mess the coat of his show cat. There were many who testified to the benefit for the cat should it be required to wear identification. The testimony pointed out that literally hundreds and hundreds of cats would be saved in this state if they wore identification. The bill passed without the requirement of the collar. I can only believe that one man's objection that affected him personally, certainly not his cat, was found to be more compelling than saving the lives of hundreds of cats a year. Do we honor cats? Sadly, no. This has to change in order to end their killing. After 6 years of working in this field, I'm beginning to fully understand that we are, when talking about the morality of neutering pets, preaching to the converted. That the morality of the issue does not change the behavior of the pet-owning population. That in terms of cats, the longer that they are left to breed uncontrolled, the more their status decreases. And as their status decreases, it becomes easier for us to ignore their plight. As we've seen, the status of the dog has risen in this state. We must on every front see that this continues. As the dog status rises, more will be invested by the owners in their dogs. They'll receive better health care. They'll come into the house to live as members of the family. Yes. They will receive the benefit of obedience training to help them become suitable house companions. 10 years ago, it was not that common for people to take their dogs to obedience classes. Today, it is becoming a common practice. As the status of the dog grows, obedience training will become as common as buying a leash and a collar for a new pet dog. I believe it will be the status that we hold them in that will in the end save their lives. It is when we give them this status that the morality of their dying will truly be able to protect them. We seem to be on the right path in our quest to save dogs' lives in this state. We need to find a path for cats. Reflecting on how we arrived on this road to helping dogs will be key in the struggle to help our feline companions. It is, as I've already stated, a very complex issue. The passage of the mandatory rabies vaccination for cats is a step, even without the collar and tag clause in it, in elevating the status of the cat. 1993 is going to be declared the National Year of the Cat, with local and national humane society organizations all across the United States using all their efforts to educate about cats, again helping to elevate this cat status. Unfortunately, we're on the verge of a rabies epidemic in this state. This rabies epidemic, I fear, could further decrease the status of cats in our state, especially those cats who appear to be unowned, and these cats number in the thousands. We can take this crisis and turn it into an opportunity to help cats. We can take this opportunity to pass legislation to protect human beings, and as similar dog legislation has elevated the status of dogs, it will elevate the status of cats. We can take this opportunity to educate the public about acting immediately on the arrival of a stray cat to their door, before that animal reproduces, before that animal bites someone, before that animal becomes ill or starves or freezes to death. We can take this opportunity to impress on the public the importance of collaring and tagging their pet cat, the importance of limiting their cat's access to the out-of-doors. And as we take these opportunities, pass legislation, neuter more cats, provide timely help to those who are stray, we will limit their numbers. As their numbers are limited, their status will grow, as it has with dogs. The degree that we increase the status of both the cats and dogs in our state will become the same degree that we lower the killing rate of our companion animals in shelters. As you see the thousands of collars around you, representing the animals killed in New Hampshire, take time to really feel the loss. There are so many they cease to have much meaning. Please take one of these collars home with you tonight. Just one collar, and with that collar, renew your pledge to end the killing. It starts with just you. Set the example of bringing the status of these animals up. Open your eyes to their plight. Begin to notice the forgotten many who are homeless. Each action you take, whether it is to take a stray cat to a shelter, remind your neighbor to put an ID tag on their pet, volunteer at a shelter, make a donation to a spay-neuter program, join a local obedience club, take part in legislation, whatever it is you can do, I ask you on behalf of the shelter workers in this state, but more importantly on behalf of the cats and dogs unable to speak for themselves, to take that action. Your action will elevate their status. Your action will be a kindness. Your action will in time end their killing. Your action will be what we are here tonight to do. Your action will honor those animals. Thank you. At this time, I'm asking shelter workers from shelters across the state to come to the podium. We will be reading the collars from those animals killed on a single day this past week in our state. Some shelter workers will, if they wish, also take this time to tell you about a single animal they were called upon to euthanize that had a special meaning for them. 4 years old, who was brought to our shelter on 8/14/92. That was eight days ago. She only was at the shelter for less than a half an hour. There was no room for her at the shelter. She was brought in because her owners were moving, and I euthanized her within a half an hour of her coming in. When I held her body, I noticed how beautiful a cat she was and how tragic her death was. Would you like to come up first? This is Monadnock Region Humane Society. Thanks.
My name is Roberta Troughton. I represent the Monadnock Region Humane Society in Keene. I'm the newest member on the team there. Most people call me Bert, and I consider you all friends now, so you can too. I'm really happy to see so many people here tonight, and I actually have some good news for you. Although I do have collars in my hand, we put down only 4 animals on Monday. They were the only 4 animals killed at our shelter this week. And in each instance, yeah, that's worth applause. In each instance, it was an issue of disease and not one of overcrowding. Unfortunately, as any of you who are aware of this issue and all of you who work at shelters know, this kind of week is few and far between. I sat down on Wednesday with the rest of the staff and we tried to come up with a story about a particular animal that meant a great deal to us. And one by one we started swapping story after story, and it became painfully obvious that we weren't going to be able to narrow it down to one story. As any of you who work in shelters know, not one of these lives is easy to part with. The animals that were killed at the Monadnock Region Humane Society this week were Feisty, a 2-year-old female cat, a white calico number 11309, Marbles, a long-haired tiger, 2 years old, and her kitten, number 11305. May remembering their lives together here tonight somehow help to reduce the numbers to come. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sharon Farnham, and I represent the Concord SPCA in Pennacook. I'm just going to read the 4 callers to you. We have an abandoned female calico cat, number 948. An abandoned female gray and white cat, number 944. A stray, unnamed, female black and white cat, number 947. And the 4th one was another stray, unnamed female, tortoise cat, number 945. I'd like to thank everybody for coming.
Good evening. My name is Pete Archibald. I'm from the Animal Rescue League of New Hampshire, located in Goffstown. Walking the chain, as we all did, I hope some of you actually bent down and took a look at the names. I'm sure you did. From our shelter, we put the reasons why the animals were brought into the shelter, as well as the names on each of the callers. Some of the reasons were moving, can't afford to keep, sheds too much, or too unruly, can't handle. Although these reasons may vary greatly, they all can be placed in one category, and that is, did not take the time to think before getting the animal. And although we have literally thousands of collars symbolizing real living animals, it takes only one animal to die, have to die, to know that change has to be made. I'd like to tell you about one. This is KC. He came to the shelter on February 20th last year. He was dropped off because the parents had no prior knowledge that the daughter was bringing a dog home. He's a 6-month-old Shepherd Cross Golden boy, beautiful dog. We adopted him out December 20th of '91, and we spent so much time with him and with the new potential adopters to let those folks know how much dog they were going to be getting. They assured us that they were prepared. February 20th, the dog returned. I put him on television. He was in the paper a number of times. Volunteers walked him each day. Staff members, workers in the shelter, petted him. We were with him every day. On May 1st of this year, he was put to sleep. He was no longer lifting his head as we walked by the cage. We call it kennel sour. I'd like to read a little excerpt from an essay by Linda Eastlake, and this is it. They set immediately to the task of freeing this poor animal, possibly for the first time, from the torment of fleas and dirt via a warm, relaxing bath. They followed this with a walk in the sun and days of cookies, sympathetic words, and friendly scratches in just the right spots. And when that 5th day arrives, this old dog's final thoughts are of being warm and secure in the arms of a trusted friend, of feeling sleepy and then of nothing. Let's break this chain. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Tanya, a volunteer from Stratham, and this week we destroyed 2 kittens, Luckily, we've been able to adopt out a lot recently. The animal that I remember most recently his name was Makita. He was a cross between a shepherd and a husky. And I swear he had human eyes. And he was with us in the shelter far too long, but certainly not long enough on this planet. And eventually he lashed out at the humans who cared for him the most because he had not been cared by humans previously. And every time I personally see another dog with blue eyes, I'll always think of him. Thank you.
Yeah, I told him to. Okay, I'm Sharon from Cocheco Valley Humane Society. Thanks a lot. I plan to talk about a dog from a cruelty investigation known as Ugg the Pug, but after thinking about the purpose of this vigil, I decided that Ugg really didn't represent the norm of animals that we receive at the shelter. Haha, good. You want me to start over? Okay. I plan to talk today about a dog from a cruelty investigation known as Ugg the Pug, but after thinking about the purpose of this vigil, I decided that Ugg really didn't really represent the norm of animals that we receive at the shelter. Earlier today, I was trying to think of one special animal. I found it impossible to pick just one. Then I remembered the first family of kittens, babies, and their mother I euthanized in the spring. I don't remember the date, the mother cat's name, or what they even looked like, but that's really not important. The fact is that on that afternoon, I took the life of an innocent mother and her infant family. While I waited for someone to assist me with the euthanasia, I watched the mother nursing and cleaning her kittens, as all good mother cats do. I kept thinking, why didn't they just get her spayed? This could have been prevented. As she looked up at me with her trust in her eyes, I made her a promise that I would take care of her and her babies. Moments later, as they lay dead on the table, I opened the silver trash bag beside them, gently arranging the mother cat's body inside the bag, then taking each kitten and placing it on her belly like it was still nursing. I kept my promise, and they went wherever all good animals go, together. No one would ever abandon them again. How ironic they were disposed of like the daily trash, right down to the trash bag. This mother cat's only mistake in life was that she trusted and loved an irresponsible owner. Will this senseless killing ever end? Okay, on August 17th, we euthanized Noelle, a black long-haired female 4-year-old cat, an unnamed 13-week-old kitten, and Pepper, a pregnant and still nursing the last litter of kittens, long-haired calico. There are more.
Hi, I'm Kristen and I work at the Cocheco Valley Humane Society, and I'm here to talk about 3 kittens that were euthanized on August 17th of 1992. A domestic short-haired black and white kitten, 12 weeks old, a feral black kitten, and Tippy, a 3-month-old kitten, female.
I'm Donna Brigley Savlik, and I'm also from Cocheco Valley Humane Society, and also on the 17th of this month we euthanized an adult stray tortoiseshell and white female cat, a cat named Snickers, who was a year-old domestic short-hair gray tabby, and a cat named Cuddles, who was a patched tabby and white and was 2 years old. Give those to Barbara. I had to work today at the shelter, and today my job was murder, like some other people, I'm sure, who are here. I euthanized 10 animals today, and since they could not live to see the end of this Homeless Companion Animals Day, I would like to share their names with you. Morgan, a purebred Doberman, who was 10 years old and had no fur on her. I euthanized her today and her 2 3-day-old puppies. An unnamed mother cat, black and white, short hair, and her 3 2-day-old kittens. A cat named Tiger, who was a 9-year-old spayed female, short-haired, and an unnamed kitten with a bad upper respiratory infection, a long-haired black and white kitten. We had a cat named Taz, who I was going to tell you about tonight, and whose collar I wear. We're all wearing collars of animals that we've euthanized. But instead, I'll tell you about another cat, a stray domestic long-hair blue cream tortoiseshell who was brought into our shelter 29 days ago. She was a very pretty cat. She loved kittens, and she didn't have any with her when she came in, but when she was allowed out of her cage for exercise, she would run up to the cages with the kittens in them and try to clean them by licking them. And if any kitten began to cry in our cat room, she would become all alarmed, and I'd have to go over to her and pat her and assure her that the kitten was all right. On the days when our shelter is closed, I'd let her out of her cage to stretch out on my desk, and she'd try to play with my pen while I tried to do my paperwork. And then finally, almost 2 weeks ago, she became the cat that had been at the shelter the longest. So I had her photographed and made her Pet of the Week in our local newspaper. And unfortunately, not one person called. No one cared to ask where this stray cat had come from. No one cared that she was beautiful. No one cared that she got along with cats and dogs. No one cared that she was young or that she had silky fur or that she liked to clean kittens or stretch out on a desk or play with a pen. So today, when the other unwanted cats came through our door, filling our cat room beyond capacity, I lovingly took her life. She doesn't have to spend another sunny Sunday in a 2x2 cage, and she won't have to cause the death of another cat just as beautiful who took her space today and will take another's space tomorrow and another's space later until I take her life as well when she too is not adopted. Am I to blame for taking her life? Some people call me a murderer, but who is really to blame? The owners of the cat's mother who did not have their cat spayed? Or the cat's owner for not providing her with identification or not bothering to look for her when she was lost? Maybe you who accepted a cat being given away instead of adopting a pet from a shelter, or you who bought a pet from a pet shop, or you who allowed your own cat to breed when so many die every day. She is at peace now, and she will never have to spend another day of her life in a cage, and she'll never have to spend another day on this planet where cats are trash.
My name is Debbie. I also work at the Cocheco Valley Humane Society. And on 8/17, we also destroyed a domestic long-haired black kitten. A 12-week-old female, Jackson, the black and tan coon-hound, 11 months old. Oh, baby, an Abyssinian cross female, 1.5-year-old. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Helen, and I'm also from the Cocheco Valley Humane Society. The list goes on. Sam, a 3-month-old male kitten, a feral black kitten, an adult stray tabby and white female domestic long-hair, and Tom, also a domestic long-hair tabby and white male, named Tom, yes. I had prepared a story, but I guess the most important thing I could say tonight, I've worked at the Valley for 5 years, and I was totally unprepared to see these chains going on and on, endless. As we looked at them, looking for the ones from Cocheco Valley, each time I thought I found it, each time I thought I recognized the name, I realized it was another shelter. The nameless cats, the nameless dogs, the Fidos, the TJs, the Chucks. I mean, they're at everyone's shelter. And I wasn't prepared. I hope next year the chain is shorter.
Hi, my name is Heather. I'm the new shelter manager at the New Hampshire Humane Society in Laconia. When asked to think of an animal that popped into my head that meant the most to me, there's so many, but to think of one, there's one that really hurts to think about. In the last 2 weeks, we euthanized 35 cats one day, and one of those cats had been in a foster home with kittens. And she came back, the kittens got adopted, and she sat for a couple of months. And the woman that foster homed these kittens is here tonight. And I just want to thank her so much for opening up her heart and her home and taking in these cats that she has no guarantee that we will place, and for doing it over and over and over. And on Monday, I'm going to read some that we euthanized. One was Rosie, an 8-month-old unspayed female cat. Another one was Mouth, a 2-year-old unspayed female cat. 2 unnamed kittens, 8 weeks old. 2 cats from the same home, Mosh and Cinnamon, both spayed barn cats, 9 and 15 years old. Lowlife, a cat, 1.5 years old, unspayed female. Boots, an 8-month-old Collie Shepherd mix. Scratches, an adult cat, unspayed female. And there's more.
My name is Alicia Morrison. I hadn't originally planned to come up here and speak, but I wanted my voice to be heard. Just yesterday, the girls and I shared in a celebration my first year as a kennel worker. It was a celebration for me because I had made a difference in these animals' lives. We at the Laconia Humane Society are the last people to show these animals they are loved before they're humanely put to sleep. And I want society to know that we are angry, that we have to bear this burden for their irresponsibility to their animals. We are called murderers because we care enough to take these animals off the street where they are abused, neglected, and just dumped like trash. I want society to take responsibility for these lives. I have 3 lives here. The first is Tanka, 8 years old, German Shepherd, pedigree dog. 5 kittens, 2 weeks old. They weren't even given a chance to live. Two kittens, 3 months old, spent most of their 3 months in the shelter. Not much of a life.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Madura, and I'm from the Upper Valley Humane Society in Enfield, New Hampshire. And we didn't have any euthanasias on Monday, but I decided to do Wednesday. And I'll just read you the names of each of these cats. They're all cats, and they're all sick with feline leukemia. They tested positive for feline leukemia. And I'd just like you to note that these cats came from 2 homes. 2 people brought these cats in. Prince, Bashful, Cherry, 755, Dopey, Baby, Happy, Sleepy, Doc, 760, 761, 759, 758, 757, 756, Grumpy, Buttons, Trouble, E.T., 603, and Sneezy. And these people thought that they were doing us a favor by supplying our shelter.
My name is Dave Hamlin. I'm a representative of the New Hampshire Doberman Rescue League. I don't have a caller to read. I guess our league can be proud of the fact that we place most of the dogs that come into our shelter. Last fall, however, though, I had to rescue a male Doberman in Manchester. He had been left to fend for himself for over 5 years. Dr. Tucker in Bedford estimated the age of this boy to be somewhere between 15 and 17 years of age. The folks at Goffstown who are represented here today allowed me to bring that dog over there. After the medical diagnosis was made, we knew this dog had to be put to sleep. You've heard that word, put to sleep, and euthanasia a lot tonight. I'm 50 years old, and for the first time in my life, I had to hold a dog. Well, they killed it. I didn't like it. I still don't. It bothered me then, it bothers me now. We have got to put a stop to this. You humane people who are here tonight, we work with most of you. You're overworked, you're underpaid, and you're terribly misunderstood by this society. My hat is off to you figuratively and literally. It is with a certain amount of pride and probably a little bit of shame that I can say our shelter just placed its 7,018th Doberman in the last 18 years.
Well, it's time now to light our candles, and there are people out there who have lighters if you don't have yours. And when we all have our candles lit, then Mary Ranosian from the New Hampshire Animal Rights League will come up and share a poem with us.
Good evening. Before I read the following poems, I would like to say a big thank you to Dr. Robert Finesse of Apple Tree Animal Hospital and Dr. Barry Taylor of Franklin Veterinary Clinic for their participation in low-cost spay and neuter programs and their outstanding commitment to curbing the pet overpopulation crisis here in New Hampshire. I would also like to say thank you to Barbara Bonsignor of the New Hampshire Low-Cost Spaying and Altering Service. Barbara has had over 6,000 pets spayed or neutered through her program, and her wonderful efforts are also to be commended. I hope everyone will leave tonight with a determination to convince their co-workers, family members, friends, and neighbors to spay and neuter their cat, mutt, or purebred. It's time we stop having the shelters do our dirty work. It is time we stop the killing. It is time we start spaying and neutering our pets. Now, for the first poem, it was written by Jay Thorngren, a previous employee of the Santa Cruz SPCA, and it describes how he feels as he's putting down an animal. Eye to eye, trust and sorrow breaks my heart as on the morrow. To sensitive beings wanting to live, death is the kindness that I can give. If only it were mine to do, life and love I'd give to you. The task performed as if by rote, a painful lump forms in my throat. It makes me angry, mad as hell. Unwanted life, please sleep well. The next poem was submitted by Martha Lenz of the Orlando Humane Society. For all the years you've been my friend and all the love you've shown, I can't believe that there's an end to this wonderful love we've known. And so entrust this flame I light, this candle raised to thee, and know that when I too shall pass, so then you'll be back with me. And too I'll see those pets I've loved, but yet could not here save, those orphan loves whose homes were found, not here, but beyond the grave. May all you know that in my heart you hold a special place, and there I pledge forevermore your memory I shall embrace. We would like to thank everyone for coming to the vigil tonight. Before we all disperse, we would just like to have a moment of silence for all the animals that were killed in the shelters, and also for all the strays that are on the streets right now that have no one to turn to. Thank you.
Thank you again for coming, and let's keep this light burning. Let's remember the legislation in 1993, and let's all get back here for it, okay? Thank you.